Most people think of sleep as the ultimate cure. We say to ourselves, if only I could get a full 8 hours, I would finally feel rested. And yet, how many times have you woken up after a long night in bed, only to feel just as tired, irritable, or anxious as the night before? The body was still, the eyes were closed, but the mind, your most powerful organ, never stopped. This is the hidden cost of modern rest. Sleep without peace. In today's world, this pattern has become almost universal. For people in their mid-30s to mid-40s, the problem is especially sharp. At this stage of life, responsibilities pile up, children to raise, aging parents to support, careers to manage, mortgages and bills to pay. The weight doesn't disappear when the lights go out. Instead, it follows us into bed like an uninvited guest. And here lies the paradox. We believe that closing our eyes should be enough, that time alone will heal us. But sleep does not erase thoughts, it reinforces them. Neuroscience now confirms what Stoic philosophers sensed centuries ago. The subconscious is most active at night. It absorbs, organizes, and strengthens whatever you last fed it. Think of the subconscious as a gardener. It doesn't care what seeds it is given. It simply nurtures whatever falls into the soil. If you fall asleep angry, the gardener waters anger. If you fall asleep replaying an argument, it fertilizes resentment. If you drift off after scrolling through social media, it cultivates envy and comparison. And by morning, these thoughts are stronger, more deeply rooted, shaping how you react to the world. Carl Jung warned, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. What he meant was simple. If you do not choose your last thoughts, they will choose you. And when repeated night after night, they create a sense of inevitability. You don't just feel anxious, you become the kind of person who wakes up anxious. You don't just feel resentful, you become the kind of person who carries resentment as an identity. For someone in their 20s, a restless night might feel inconvenient. For someone in their 40s, it can be devastating. At this stage, the nervous system is already carrying decades of habit. Sleep deprivation doesn't just leave you groggy, it amplifies stress, weakens emotional resilience, and affects how you parent, how you lead, how you love. Think about the father who lies awake after a meeting at work, replaying what his manager said. He finally falls into shallow sleep, but his subconscious never stops arguing. By morning, his jaw aches from grinding his teeth. He hasn't solved anything, he's only rehearsed conflict until it hardened inside him. Or consider the mother who collapses after putting the kids to bed. She scrolls Instagram, half to unwind, half to escape. She sees friends on vacation, colleagues celebrating promotions, acquaintances buying houses. The quiet message her subconscious receives is, I'm behind. I'm not enough. She wakes up tired not because she lacked hours, but because insecurity was rehearsed into her bones overnight. These aren't dramatic tragedies. They are everyday realities, repeated so often that they become invisible. And yet they quietly shape the lives of millions. We often seek distraction as a form of relief. Netflix, TikTok, endless scrolling. These become the rituals of winding down. We tell ourselves, I deserve this. This is how I relax. But the subconscious does not recognize entertainment. It only recognizes input. and it absorbs whatever it is given. That crime drama you fall asleep to, the arguments you skim on Twitter, the envy triggered by your feed, all of it becomes part of your nightly rehearsal. Sleep does not care whether you label it fun or stressful. It processes it all, and so what feels like escape is often programming. We think we are numbing ourselves, but we are actually feeding the very chaos we hope to escape. The Stoics saw this problem long before blue light or social media. They lived in a noisy, chaotic world, two empires rising and falling, politics filled with betrayal, families weighed down by disease and death. But instead of distraction, they chose reflection. Seneca, for example, ended each day with a personal audit. What did I do well? Where did I fall short? What must I release before sleep? Marcus Aurelius filled journals not for the world, but for himself, whispering reminders. Life is short. Anger is wasteful. Virtue is enough. Epictetus urged his students to practice discipline, not on the outside world, but on their own thoughts. They understood something we've largely forgotten, that the final 5 minutes of the day matter more than the hours that follow. In those minutes, the mind is soft, open, receptive. Whatever you feed, it slips past the filters of reason and lodges deep in the subconscious. By treating this window as sacred, the Stoics gave themselves a hidden advantage. Their mornings began not with chaos, but with clarity. The real definition of rest is not simply the absence of movement. True rest is the presence of peace. You can lie perfectly still and still be restless if your thoughts are racing. You can sleep for 8 hours and wake up drained if your subconscious rehearsed fear all night. But if you guide the mind into sleep with discipline, even a shorter rest can leave you stronger. This is why Stoicism is more relevant now than ever. We don't just need hacks for productivity. We don't just need pills for sleep. We need wisdom for peace, because without peace, sleep is just unconscious worry. And without deliberate reflection, mornings are just yesterday repeated. The question is not whether you will sleep tonight, you will. The question is, what will your mind rehearse? Why you do? When the world goes quiet at night, many people assume their minds do the same. But silence does not mean stillness. Beneath the surface, the subconscious continues its work. It listens, it processes, it strengthens. And the thoughts you hand it in those final moments before sleep become tomorrow's foundations. Think of it like a stage. The conscious mind is the actor, front and center during the day. It talks, it argues, it plans. But when the curtain falls at night, the subconscious takes the stage. And unlike the conscious mind, it does not debate or question. It simply accepts. It rehearses whatever script it is given, whether noble or destructive. This is why unresolved conflict feels so heavy in the morning. You didn't just fall asleep angry. You rehearsed anger all night long. That is why one sharp comment from a colleague can still sting days later. Your subconscious has been quietly repeating the scene, strengthening the wound as if it were fresh dot at 35 or 45. You no longer have the resilience of youth. Sleepless nights aren't just uncomfortable. They shape your health, your patience, your relationships. Stress hormones linger longer. Emotional recovery takes more effort. And yet we often treat our minds at night as if we were still 20, collapsing into bed with unresolved noise, assuming time itself will fix it. But time does not heal what the mind continually rehearses. You can sleep for years and never find rest if your subconscious is trained in chaos. This is why so many people in midlife describe waking up with a weight they can't explain. It isn't their schedule. It's their subconscious, faithfully replaying what they never chose to release. Overthinking is perhaps the most common thief of rest. It wears a clever disguise. It tells you that you're being careful, that you're preparing, that you're taking responsibility. But in truth, it is a parasite, feeding on your energy without giving anything back. At night, overthinking turns ordinary concerns into catastrophes. A late bill becomes financial ruin. A strange tone in an email becomes evidence of failure. A forgotten errand becomes proof you're not capable enough. Your heart races, your breath shortens, and your body responds as though you are under attack, even though the only threat is the one you created in your mind. The Stoics called this out centuries ago. Epictetus said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." Overthinking is a reaction to shadows. It is responding not to reality, but to imagination. And because the subconscious accepts repetition as truth, these imagined scenarios feel increasingly real. By morning, you don't just remember the thought, you believe it. Overthinking feeds into another modern epidemic, emotional clutter. This is the invisible weight of unresolved emotions, bitterness toward a colleague, guilt about parenting, shame about finances. These are not fleeting feelings. They become background noise, filling your inner world so completely that there is no room left for clarity. Seneca wrote, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." Emotional clutter is the proof. A single careless comment can become an entire narrative of inadequacy. One mistake can spiral into an identity of failure, and when carried into sleep, these narratives deepen. The subconscious does not ask, "Is this helpful?" It simply says, "This must be important," because it keeps repeating. This is why so many wake up weary. They haven't been resting. They've been marinating in the very emotions they needed to release. So what do the Stoics teach us? That peace at night is not automatic, it is deliberate. They treated the final minutes of the day as sacred. Seneca reflected each evening, asking, "What did I do well today? Where did I fall short? What must I release before sleep?" Marcus Aurelius wrote page after page, not to publish, but to remind himself of what mattered. Life is short. Anger is wasted. Virtue is enough. These were not lectures, they were instructions to his subconscious. He understood that if he did not train his mind, the noise of the world would do it for him. And here's the crucial difference between them and us. They took responsibility for their last thoughts. We, on the other hand, often hand that responsibility to algorithms and glowing screens. Instead of reflection, we give our subconscious an endless scroll of other people's lives. Instead of peace, we feed it chaos disguised as entertainment. Modern culture tells us that holding on is strength. Fight harder. Prove you were right. Demand the last word. But the Stoics saw letting go as the truest form of power. To them, forgiveness was not about excusing injustice, it was about refusing to suffer twice. Socrates believed that reflection should lead to clarity, not endless self-punishment. To cling is to bleed from the same wound over and over. To let go is to allow it to heal. And this discipline of letting go is not weakness, it is sovereignty. It is the ability to say, this does not deserve space in my mind tonight. For the modern adult, especially between 35 and 45, a simple nightly practice can change everything. Before sleep, ask 3 questions. What did I do well today? Remind your subconscious of your strengths. Where did I fall short? And what can I learn? Frame mistakes as lessons, not identities. What am I carrying that does not belong to tomorrow? Release what drains you. Write the answers. Whisper them aloud. Or simply hold them in your thoughts. What matters is not the format, but the intention. The subconscious does not need elaborate rituals. It needs clarity. And if you give it clarity, it will rehearse peace instead of chaos. At this stage of life, energy is too precious to waste. The world demands your presence at work, at home, in relationships. But presence cannot come from exhaustion. It comes from clarity, and clarity is built at night. This is the promise of Stoicism, that you can train your mind not only in the chaos of the day, but in the silence of the night. That sleep is not just escape, it is rehearsal. And with discipline, you can choose the script, because tomorrow will come whether you are ready or not. The only question is, will you rise carrying yesterday's chaos or today's clarity? One of the most misunderstood ideas in modern life is detachment. People hear the word and assume it means coldness, indifference, or emotional numbness. They picture someone who doesn't care, who has no passion, who walks away from relationships and responsibilities. But this is not what detachment means in the Stoic tradition. For the Stoics, detachment was not the absence of feeling. It was the presence of power. Real detachment is when you feel everything, love, anger, disappointment, joy, but you no longer let those emotions own you. You see clearly without collapsing into what you see. You feel deeply without being dragged under. Detachment is not about shutting down, it's about rising above. Marcus Aurelius captured this in one of his most famous reminders. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. Detachment is that realization in action. It is not suppression, it is sovereignty. It is the ability to let the world be what it is, while you choose how to respond. The hours before sleep are when emotions roar the loudest. The world outside is silent, and in that silence your inner world gains volume. Every regret, every argument, every unfinished thought begins to echo, and without detachment, those echoes become storms. Think of the last time you went to bed angry. The argument replayed again and again. You rehearsed what you should have said, what they should have said, how unfair it all was. By morning, nothing had changed in reality, but inside, the anger had doubled. The subconscious had faithfully rehearsed conflict for hours. Detachment interrupts this pattern. It says, this moment is not my identity. This pain is not permanent. This thought does not deserve to run all night. And with practice, you can end the day without carrying its sharp edges into the night. Another trap that steals rest is the obsession with closure. We are told that healing requires resolution, that until someone apologizes, until a conversation is had, until a story makes sense, we cannot move on. But the Stoics knew that closure rarely arrives from the outside. More often, it is a choice you make within. Life is full of unfinished sentences. People leave without explanation. Friendships dissolve without warning. Opportunities vanish without reason. If you wait for closure to arrive neatly packaged from others, you may wait forever. In the meantime, your subconscious keeps rehearsing the story night after night, weaving pain deeper into your identity. Seneca once warned, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." The search for closure is a perfect example. You imagine that if you could just understand why, the pain would disappear. But often understanding doesn't remove pain, it extends it. You replay the story endlessly, looking for answers that will never arrive. The Stoic alternative is to create closure internally. This doesn't mean pretending nothing happened. It means acknowledging what did happen, accepting what cannot be changed, and refusing to let it define tomorrow. It is the ability to say, "This story may not be finished, but I choose not to carry it into my sleep." This is not easy, but it is powerful. It is giving yourself permission to rest, not because the world made sense, but because you value peace more than answers. And when practiced nightly, it becomes a form of strength. You no longer beg the past to explain itself. You no longer let others decide when you are free. You give yourself closure, and in doing so, you reclaim your rest. How can you practice detachment before sleep? Start small. When a thought arises, resentment, insecurity, unfinished arguments, don't fight it. Fighting keeps it alive. Instead, observe it, label it, say to yourself, "This is anger, this is fear, this is longing." By naming it, you create distance. Then remind yourself, "This does not belong to tonight." Breathe. Let it pass like a cloud across the sky. Some nights you will need to repeat this a dozen times. That is not failure. That is training. The subconscious doesn't change with a single decision. It changes with repetition. And every night you practice detachment. You teach your mind to rest more deeply. For adults in midlife, detachment is not optional. It is survival. At 35 or 45, you are carrying too many roles: parent, partner, professional, caretaker. Each role comes with emotional hooks, expectations, disappointments, fears. Without detachment, you are pulled in a dozen directions every night, and sleep becomes another battlefield. But with detachment, you learn to set the weight down. You still love your children, but you don't replay every parenting mistake at 2 a.m. You still care about your work, but you don't let one email define your worth. You still feel grief, anger, and longing, but you don't let them hijack your rest. This is not indifference. It is wisdom. It is choosing peace not because life is perfect, but because you cannot afford to rehearse chaos any longer. Plato once said, "The first and greatest victory is to conquer yourself." Detachment is that victory in practice. It is not won once it is won nightly in the quiet battle with your own thoughts. Every time you choose not to carry an argument into sleep, you win. Every time you release a need for closure, you win. Every time you end the day with clarity instead of clutter, you win. And the beauty of this victory is that no one else has to lose. Detachment is not about domination. It is about liberation, the quiet freedom of a mind that finally rests. As you prepare for sleep tonight, ask yourself, what am I still holding that does not belong to tomorrow? It may be a sharp word from someone you love, It may be a mistake at work. It may be the silence of someone who never gave you closure. Whatever it is, recognize it, release it, and remind yourself, I will not let this rehearse itself in me all night. The mind is always listening. The question is, what will you let it hear? There is a kind of tiredness that no amount of sleep can cure. You know the feeling well. You collapse into bed, give yourself a full night, and wake up with heavy eyes and a heavier spirit. Your body was still, your eyes were closed, but something inside you never stopped working. That something is the clutter of unprocessed emotions, the quiet burden that travels with us into every night. We often assume exhaustion is purely physical. We blame our schedules, our workload, or our lack of exercise. But what if the real weight is invisible? What if the exhaustion you feel every morning comes not from what you did during the day, but from what you carried into the night? This is emotional clutter. Emotional clutter takes many forms. It can be the resentment from a harsh comment that still lingers in your chest. It can be the guilt from snapping at your child or partner. It can be the shame of a mistake made years ago, still rehearsed as though it happened yesterday. These pieces of emotional debris are small on their own, but together they crowd the mind, suffocating clarity. The problem is not that we feel Stoicism never demanded numbness. The problem is that we refuse to release. We hold grudges like trophies, hoping they'll protect us. We replay arguments, convinced it prepares us. We cling to guilt, thinking it proves we care. But what all this clinging really does is rob us of peace. During the day, distractions drown out the clutter. Work, conversations, and constant notifications keep us from noticing the weight we carry. But at night, when the world quiets, the clutter rises. The subconscious, ever faithful, replays the unresolved emotions, magnifying them with repetition. This is why a single insult can haunt you for weeks. It's not that the words themselves were so powerful, it's that you rehearsed them every night. It's why one mistake feels like an identity. The subconscious doesn't measure importance by truth. It measures importance by repetition. And if you carry bitterness into bed, it assumes bitterness must be your reality. Carl Jung said it well. What you resist not only persists, but grows. By refusing to release emotional clutter, we don't freeze it in time, we feed it. Each night becomes fertilizer for the very weeds we wish would vanish. Think about a cluttered room. At first, a few misplaced objects don't matter, but as more piles up, the room changes. It becomes harder to navigate, harder to breathe. You waste energy just moving around. Emotional clutter works the same way. A few unresolved emotions might seem harmless, but over time they consume space in your inner world, shaping how you see yourself. A cluttered mind interprets even neutral events as threats. A simple comment feels like an insult. A quiet moment feels like loneliness. A missed call feels like rejection. This is not truth, it's distortion born from clutter. And when carried long enough, that distortion hardens into identity. You don't just feel anxious, you become an anxious person. You don't just feel resentful, you become someone who lives in resentment. For adults in midlife, the danger is even greater. By 35 or 45, life is heavy enough already. Careers demand excellence. Children need attention. Parents need care. Bills arrive without mercy. The body doesn't recover as quickly, and the nervous system has less tolerance for chronic stress. Emotional clutter adds a hidden tax to everything. It makes mornings harder, patience shorter, and joy rarer. You may think you are simply busy, but what you are, in truth, is cluttered. And unless you release the weight each night, it multiplies until burnout feels inevitable. The Stoics saw emotional clutter as one of life's greatest dangers, not because they despised emotion, but because they valued clarity. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The tranquility that comes when you stop caring what they say or think or do, only what you do." For him, tranquility was not a gift. It was the result of clearing away what did not serve. Seneca, too, practiced nightly review. He asked himself, "What anger did I feed today? What fear did I carry that I could have set down? What resentment can I release before sleep?" These questions were not rituals of guilt, but of hygiene. Just as dirt builds on the skin, clutter builds in the mind. To end the day without cleansing is to invite decay. Modern culture often confuses letting go with weakness. We admire those who fight, who hold grudges, who refuse to forgive. But the Stoics saw letting go as the highest strength. To release is not to excuse. To release is not to forget. To release is to refuse to bleed from the same wound twice. Socrates said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." But examination was never meant to be endless punishment. It was meant to lead to clarity. Clarity is not found in clinging. It is found in releasing. And that release, practiced nightly, is the discipline that makes true rest possible. Name it. When you feel the weight, give it a name. Anger, guilt, shame. Naming separates you from it. Write it. Put the thought on paper. Once written, it doesn't need to echo in your head. Reframe it. Ask yourself, will this matter in 5 years? If not, it doesn't deserve tonight. Release it. Breathe deeply and say, "This does not belong to tomorrow." These steps are simple but powerful. The subconscious doesn't need complexity. It needs clarity. And clarity is born of small, repeated choices. The strongest people are not those who carry everything. They are those who know what to carry and what to set down. Emotional clutter is not proof of your humanity. It is proof of your unwillingness to release. And every night you practice release, you teach your subconscious to rest, to recover, to prepare for a new day without yesterday's weight. The Stoics did not live in silence. They lived in empires filled with betrayal, war, and uncertainty. And yet they trained their minds to remain steady, not by suppressing emotion, but by refusing to let emotion clutter their nights. You have the same choice every night: to sleep cluttered or to sleep clear, to rehearse pain or to release it. And the life you wake to depends on which you choose. Everywhere you look today, the world is screaming for more productivity hacks, more information, more routines, more apps that promise to optimize every second of your life. And yet, in the pursuit of more, what most of us have forgotten is the wisdom of less. The Stoics understood that clarity rarely comes from addition, it comes from subtraction. The discipline of peace is not about what you pile on. It's about what you strip away. That is what I call mental detox. Mental detox is not a buzzword to trend on social media. It's not about exotic rituals, expensive retreats, or complicated systems. It is the timeless act of choosing which thoughts deserve to remain in your mind and which ones must be cleared out before they poison the atmosphere of your inner world. Just as you would never go to bed without brushing your teeth, the Stoics believed you should never end a day without cleansing the mind. Think about your typical evening. The workday ends, but your brain doesn't. It replays conversations, reopens emails, relives arguments. Then, instead of unwinding, you reach for your phone. News feeds flood you with chaos. Social media serves you comparison. Entertainment fills your mind with manufactured drama, and you tell yourself you're relaxing. But the subconscious doesn't recognize relaxing. It only registers input. Like a sponge, your mind soaks in whatever you feed it. And when you finally turn off the lights, that sponge doesn't wring itself out. It seeps overnight, staining your subconscious. By morning, the weight is heavier, the noise louder, and the cycle stronger. No wonder so many wake up more tired than before. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The tranquility that comes when you stop caring what they say or think or do, only what you do." For him, tranquility wasn't an accident. It was a product of hygiene, of removing the stains of the day so they wouldn't color tomorrow. The Stoics practiced mental detox as a form of daily discipline. Seneca asked himself at night, "What did I do well? Where did I fall short? What must I release?" The point wasn't perfection. It was cleansing. To identify the clutter, to acknowledge it, and then to refuse its entry into sleep. They treated the mind like a sacred space too important to be left filthy. But here's the catch. Detox requires courage. Most of us cling to our pain because it makes us feel safe. If I replay the argument, maybe I'll be ready for the next one. If I dwell on the mistake, maybe I won't repeat it. If I hold on to resentment, maybe it proves I was right. But the truth is, clinging never protects, it only poisons. Letting go doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean pretending. It means refusing to rehearse what no longer serves you. It is the courage to say, "Yes, this hurt me, but no, I will not let it drain me again tonight." That decision made night after night is what transforms clutter into clarity. So how do you actually detox your mind before sleep? The methods are simple, but the discipline is rare. Journaling. Put the noise on paper. Once it's written, it no longer needs to echo. Journaling is not about eloquence. It's about extraction. Breathing. Deep, slow breaths signal the body that the danger has passed. They lower stress hormones, preparing the mind to release. Reflection without judgment. Ask, what happened today that I cannot control? Then, consciously decide to set it down. These practices are small but powerful. They tell the subconscious, here is what matters. Here is what doesn't. And the subconscious, loyal recorder, that it is, listens. In our age, the need for detox is greater than ever. Screens are constant. Notifications endless. Comparison unavoidable. We are bombarded with more data in a single day than our ancestors absorbed in a lifetime. Without detox, we drown. With it, we find clarity, even in chaos. For someone in midlife juggling careers, children, parents, finances, mental detox is not luxury. It is survival. At this stage, your nervous system has less tolerance for chronic stress. Burnout comes faster. Fatigue cuts deeper. Without nightly release, Tomorrow becomes a repetition of today's clutter. Amplified, the promise of Stoicism is not that life will become easy. It's that you can become steady, and that steadiness begins at night. When you choose to detox, you're not erasing your problems, you're refusing to let them rehearse endlessly. You're choosing which seeds will be planted in your subconscious garden. Aristotle believed virtue was balance, the midpoint between extremes. Mental detox is exactly that balance between awareness and obsession, between care and control. It doesn't mean you stop thinking. It means you start choosing. And that choice, practiced nightly, reshapes not just your sleep, but your life. The next time you lie in bed replaying your day, ask yourself, is this thought worth rehearsing all night? If not, write it, breathe it, release it. Empty the mind the way you clear a room, making space for peace to enter, because peace is not found in having fewer problems. It's found in carrying fewer of them into the night. And that is the true art of mental detox. Most people avoid the subject of death. We treat it as a shadow, something to push away, something to hide behind endless distractions. We bury the thought under work, entertainment, and constant noise. But no matter how hard we try, mortality waits at the edge of every quiet night. In those final moments before sleep, when the world is silent and there are no distractions left, the awareness of death often creeps in. And while many run from this awareness, the Stoics embraced it as a teacher. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily, you could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think. To him, mortality was not morbid, it was clarifying. It stripped away the trivial, the petty, the clutter, and revealed what truly mattered: peace, purpose, presence. Our culture tells us to fear death. Advertisements promise us youth forever. Industries sell anti-aging products, fitness routines, and even digital immortality. We scroll through endless feeds, distracting ourselves from the ticking clock. But beneath the denial, the truth remains. Our time is finite, and the subconscious knows it. That's why so many people feel restless at night, even when the day has been uneventful. Mortality hums beneath the silence, reminding us you are temporary. What are you doing with your days? This restlessness is not an enemy. It is a mirror. It shows us where we are clinging to what does not matter. It shows us where we are wasting precious hours. Mortality whispers not to terrify us, but to awaken us. Sleep itself is a rehearsal for death. Each night, we surrender consciousness. We release control. We allow the world to move on without us. To the Stoics, this was not frightening, but sacred. Sleep became practice, a way to prepare the mind for letting go. Seneca advised, let us prepare our minds as if we'd come to the very end of life. Let us postpone nothing. He believed that if you could end each day ready to die, you would also wake ready to live. To him, mortality was not a curse, it was a compass. When you treat sleep as rehearsal, you approach it differently. Instead of collapsing into it, cluttered with resentment, you align yourself with clarity. You let go of what is trivial, because tomorrow is not promised. You close your eyes not in denial, but in acceptance, and that acceptance creates rest. Mortality gives urgency, but not the frantic kind. It doesn't demand you work harder or move faster. It asks you to move more intentionally. It asks, if this were your last night, would these thoughts deserve to be your last? When you remember that life is short, gossip loses its grip. Petty arguments shrink. Envy feels absurd. What rises instead is gratitude for breath, for family, for the chance to try again tomorrow. Aristotle said, "Nature does nothing in vain." Death, too, has its purpose. It strips away illusions and forces us to see clearly. If you use this awareness wisely, every night becomes a purification. You carry into sleep only what truly matters and leave behind what doesn't dot at first glance. Mortality seems heavy, but in truth, it is what makes life light. When you accept that time is finite, you stop carrying unnecessary burdens. You stop replaying arguments that won't matter on your deathbed. You stop postponing joy for a someday that may never come. Mortality teaches you to travel light, to release grudges, to forgive faster, to speak more honestly, to love without waiting. It reminds you that each night could be your last, and that truth does not need to paralyze you. It can free you. Imagine ending your day with this thought: if I did not wake tomorrow, would I be content with how I lived today? It's a sharp question, but a clarifying one. If the answer is yes, you sleep in peace. If the answer is no, you know what to change, not tomorrow, but tonight. Marcus Aurelius began his mornings reminding himself of death, but he prepared the ground at night. He wrote reflections, not to despair, but to guide his subconscious. Life is short, so do not waste it on anger or fear. These weren't gloomy thoughts. They were liberating. By practicing this ritual, he trained his mind to release what was petty and cling only to what was essential. And science now supports his wisdom. People who confront mortality regularly report lower anxiety, deeper gratitude, and a greater sense of meaning. Carl Jung warned, "A man who is unconscious of the laws of his own being is at the mercy of chance." Mortality is one of those laws. Denying it leaves you enslaved to distractions. Accepting it frees you. The fear of death is really the fear of wasted life. And once you commit to living deliberately, the fear dissolves. Mortality no longer feels like an enemy, but like a teacher urging you toward focus. So each night, instead of drowning the whisper of mortality with screams or worry, let it speak. Let it remind you to choose peace over conflict, clarity over clutter, love over resentment. Let it shape the final thoughts you feed your subconscious. The Stoics did not romanticize death, but they respected it. They knew that by keeping it close, they could live more honestly. And you can do the same. Tonight, when you lie in bed, ask yourself, if these were my last thoughts, would I be proud of them? If not, change the script. Release what is trivial. Hold on to what is true, because mortality, far from being a curse, is the compass that points us to rest, to meaning, to freedom. And when you let it guide your nights, you wake not only rested but renewed, ready to live a life that truly matters. Overthinking is one of the most common forms of self-sabotage, and yet it is often disguised as responsibility. People believe they are being careful, diligent, or thorough, when in reality they are caught in a loop that drains energy without producing clarity. The Stoics would call this what it is: unnecessary suffering. At night, overthinking is especially dangerous. When the distractions of the day are gone, the mind turns inward. And for many, that inward turn becomes a spiral. A single worry grows into a catastrophe. A small regret becomes an identity crisis. One imagined scenario multiplies into a dozen disasters that have not and may never occur. The body reacts as if these stories were real. The heart quickens, the breath shortens, the muscles tighten, but nothing is happening except thought. The danger of overthinking is that it feels useful. You tell yourself that replaying the argument will help you be ready next time. You believe that worrying about tomorrow's meeting will prepare you for every possibility. You convince yourself that dissecting a mistake endlessly will guarantee you won't repeat it. But this is an illusion. Reflection seeks lessons. Overthinking seeks control. Reflection produces growth. Overthinking produces exhaustion. And because the subconscious rehearses whatever is repeated, overthinking ensures that anxiety becomes your baseline. By morning, you don't just remember the worries, you embody them. For someone in their 20s, overthinking might result in a restless night. But for someone in their late 30s or 40s, the consequences run deeper. At this stage, responsibilities are heavier, resilience is thinner, and stress leaves deeper marks. Overthinking is not just mental, it becomes physical. Blood pressure rises, immunity weakens, and patience evaporates. Think of the professional who lies awake replaying a client conversation. He analyzes every word, imagines worst-case outcomes, and convinces himself disaster is imminent. By morning, he is irritable, drained, and reactive, not because disaster struck, but because he rehearsed disaster all night. Or the parent who lies in bed worrying about their child's future. Nothing has changed in reality, but by morning, they are already tired of battles that never occurred. Epictetus taught, "It is not things that disturb us, but our judgments about them." Overthinking is the clearest example of this truth. It is not the event itself, but the story you attach to it that creates suffering. You are not hurt by the email, but by the story that the email means you are failing. You are not disturbed by the silence of a friend, but by the story that the silence means rejection. The Stoics warned against giving imagination the power of reality. To them, discipline was not about suppressing thought, but about training judgment. If a thought is useful, keep it. If it is not, release it. Overthinking ignores this wisdom and treats every thought as urgent. Label the thought. When a worry arises, simply say, "This is fear," or "This is projection." Naming creates distance. Categorize. Ask, "Is this within my control?" If yes, make a plan. If no, release it. Marcus Aurelius himself reminded, focus on your mind, not outside events. Redirect. Instead of feeding the spiral, anchor your attention to your breath, to a mantra, or to a grounding phrase like, "I don't need to solve this tonight." Limit the window. Allow 10 minutes to reflect. After that, commit to letting go. This tells the subconscious, the rehearsal is over. These are not gimmicks, they are disciplines. And the subconscious listens to discipline more than to force. The Stoics had little patience for mental indulgence. They believed that overthinking was wasted energy better spent on living. Seneca said, "We are more often frightened than hurt, and we suffer more in imagination than in reality. What he meant is clear. The mind invents pain more often than the world delivers it. By practicing nightly reflection instead of rumination, the Stoics turned the mind into an ally. They didn't avoid thinking. They simply chose thoughts that strengthened rather than drained. The cost of overthinking is not just lost sleep, it is lost presence. It steals patience with your children, clarity at work, and kindness in relationships. It turns minor stresses into major storms, not because reality demands it, but because the mind has been trained to spiral. And the more you practice overthinking, the stronger it becomes. The subconscious does not care if a thought is true, it cares if it is repeated. Each night of rehearsal strengthens the spiral until it feels inescapable. Imagine ending your day not with spirals, but with silence, not with over-analysis, but with awareness. Imagine acknowledging the worry, labeling it, and then telling yourself, this does not belong to tonight. Imagine allowing your subconscious to rehearse gratitude instead of fear. That is what Stoic practice makes possible. Overthinking is the silent thief of rest, but it is not inevitable. With awareness, discipline, and the courage to release, you can reclaim the night. And by reclaiming the night, you prepare yourself to meet the day not with exhaustion, but with strength. When people hear the word detachment, they often misunderstand it. They imagine a person who is cold, uncaring, or indifferent. Someone who shuts down emotions, avoids connection, and drifts through life without passion. But this is not the detachment the Stoics practiced. For them, detachment was not the absence of feeling, it was the mastery of it. True detachment means you feel deeply, but you are not enslaved by what you feel. You see clearly, but you are not distorted by what you see. You allow the world to move as it will, without demanding that it revolve around your expectations. This is not numbness. This is sovereignty. In our modern world, emotional reactivity is glorified. Social media rewards outrage, drama, and oversharing. If you're loud about your pain, people assume you're authentic. If you're quiet, they assume you don't care. But the Stoics would argue the opposite. Constant reactivity is weakness, not authenticity. Strength lies in the pause, the space between what happens and how you respond. Detachment doesn't make you less human. It makes you more capable. It allows you to carry love without dependence, grief without collapse, anger without destruction. It gives you the ability to hold emotions without being held hostage by them. The hours before sleep are when detachment matters most. At night, the world is quiet, and your mind becomes loud. Every regret, every unfinished argument, every longing rises. Without detachment, these thoughts take control. You replay the conversation. You demand closure. You grip tightly to resentment as though it were proof of your worth. But detachment gives you another option. It whispers, this thought is real, but it is not permanent. This feeling is strong, but it is not me. I can let it pass without letting it define me. And with that choice, you set down the weight before entering sleep. Marcus Aurelius wrote, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. This is the heart of detachment. You cannot control the words of others, the twists of fortune, or the opinions of society, but you can control how much of that noise you carry into the night. Seneca warned against going to bed without examining the day. He believed that reflection was not about guilt, but about clarity. By naming the thoughts that did not serve him, he could release them. This was detachment in practice, not ignoring life, but refusing to let life's chaos clutter the subconscious. For adults in midlife, detachment is not just philosophy, it is survival. At 35 or 45, you are pulled in many directions. Career, children, aging parents, financial pressures. Without detachment, you carry every role into bed, and sleep becomes another meeting you cannot escape. But with detachment, you set boundaries. You remind yourself, yes, I am a parent, but tonight I am not solving every worry about my child's future. Yes, I am a professional, but tonight I am not replaying every email. Detachment doesn't mean abandoning responsibility. It means refusing to carry what cannot be carried in the silence of night. Socrates believed the greatest victory was self-mastery. Detachment is that victory expressed nightly. Every time you refuse to let anger rehearse itself while you sleep, you win. Every time you release the need for control, you win. Every time you say, "This does not belong to tomorrow," you reclaim your freedom. And the beauty of detachment is that it harms no one. It does not diminish love, weaken responsibility, or erase accountability. It strengthens them because you are no longer operating from chaos. You are choosing from clarity. Witness your thoughts. Before sleep, imagine yourself as a spectator. See your thoughts rise and fall without jumping into them. Create distance. Say, "This is a thought. It is not me." By creating space, you prevent fusion between identity and emotion. Release the grip. Breathe deeply and imagine placing the thought down, like setting a heavy bag on the floor. Anchor in a truth. Replace the clutter with something steady, not. Everything requires my reaction. My peace is more valuable than my control. These practices are not about denying life. They are about reclaiming sovereignty over your inner world. Detachment is not a wall, it is a doorway. It doesn't block love, grief, or joy. It allows them to enter, but also to leave without destroying you. It reminds you that you are more than your feelings, more than your failures, more than your fears. So tonight, when your mind begins to spiral, practice the pause. Witness the thought, name it, release it. Let detachment guide you not into numbness, but into rest. Because the strongest person is not the one who holds on the tightest. It is the one who knows when to let go. One of the greatest illusions in life is the belief that closure must come from someone else. We imagine that peace will arrive when the apology finally comes, when the explanation is offered, when the missing piece of the story is returned to us. We wait for others to tie the knot so that our wounds will stop bleeding. But the Stoics would shake their heads at this. For them, closure was never something to beg for. It was something to create. Think about how many nights have been wasted replaying conversations. You lie awake, rehearsing what you should have said, wishing they would call, imagining scenarios where you get justice or understanding. But every night of waiting only deepens the wound. Because here is the truth. The apology may never come. The explanation may never make sense. The story may remain unfinished. And if your peace depends on someone else's words, then your peace will always be hostage. Seneca said, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more that is poor." The same is true for closure. It is not the absence of apology that keeps us suffering, but the craving for it. The subconscious does not understand time. To it, yesterday's betrayal is still alive. Last year's heartbreak is still fresh. Each night you rehearse the story, the subconscious strengthens it, embedding it deeper into identity. That's why you can wake up furious about something that happened years ago. It's not because the wound is still open, it's because you've kept picking at it in the silence of sleep. Carl Jung warned, "What you resist not only persists, but grows." By resisting the lack of closure, by demanding that the story be finished, you actually make it larger. The Stoic approach is radically different. Closure is not received, it is chosen. Epictetus taught that freedom comes from disregarding what is outside your control. And what could be more outside your control than another person's words or actions? If you wait for them to heal you, you will wait forever. But if you decide that healing is yours to create, you are free tonight. Creating closure does not mean you erase the past. It means you accept the past as it is, without demanding it be rewritten. It means saying, "This story may remain incomplete, but I will not let it rehearse itself in me any longer." Acknowledge the wound. Pretending it didn't happen keeps you stuck. Admit the pain, but refuse to relive it. Separate fact from story. The fact is what happened. The story is what you've told yourself about it. Often the story is heavier than the fact. Set a boundary. Decide, this ends here. I will not carry it into tonight. Boundaries are not just for people, they are for thoughts. Replace with meaning. Ask, what did this teach me? Even if the lesson is only that you are stronger than you knew, that meaning transforms the pain. Mortality sharpens this truth. Life is too short to wait for someone else to set you free. Each night could be your last. Do you want to spend it clinging to someone else's silence? The Stoics would remind you, you are responsible for your soul. Do not postpone peace for an apology that may never come. When you create your own closure, you reclaim power. You no longer hand your emotional well-being to people who may never understand you. You no longer let unfinished business define your nights. You decide that your peace is worth more than explanation, and in that decision you rest. Closure is not about erasing the story. It is about closing the book. It is about saying, this chapter is complete, even if the sentences trail off. The strongest people are not those who receive perfect endings. They are those who create endings where none were given. They are the ones who say, this pain is real, but it is not eternal. I will not let it shape tomorrow. So tonight, if you find yourself waiting for an apology, waiting for understanding, waiting for closure, stop waiting. Create it. Breathe deeply and say, I choose peace, even without answers. Because closure is not what someone else gives you. Closure is what you give yourself. There is a kind of reflection that keeps you awake but never makes you wiser. It looks serious, it sounds responsible, and it feels like you're doing the hard work of growth. But underneath the surface, it is just guilt wearing a mask. You lie there replaying the day, not to learn, but to punish. Not to see clearly, but to confirm an old verdict. I'm not enough. The Stoics would call this a misuse of attention. It is not reflection. It is rumination with a moral costume. And if you carry it into sleep, your subconscious will rehearse the whip instead of the lesson True reflection has a different texture. When you do it, your breath slows, your shoulders drop. Even if the truth stings, clarity arrives with a sense of relief. So that's what happened. Here's what I can do differently. Guilt, by contrast, tightens the jaw and shrinks your view of yourself. It repeats the same accusation without offering a next step. The first frees energy for tomorrow. The second drains it in circles all night. Why do so many smart adults confuse the two? Because guilt masquerades as responsibility. It whispers, "If you hurt enough about this, you'll never repeat it." But pain alone does not create wisdom. Attention does. The Stoics never sought pain. They sought perspective. Marcus Aurelius wrote reminders to himself not to score points for suffering, but to turn events into instruction. Seneca didn't spend evenings berating his character. He audited his choices, then moved on. Their standard was simple. Does this thought prepare me to act better tomorrow? If yes, keep it. If no, put it down. Think of two inner voices, the critic and the coach. The critic loves vague absolutes. You always do this. You never learn. It inflates a single moment into an identity. The coach stays specific and behavioral. You interrupted twice. In the meeting. Next time, wait for 2 breaths before speaking. One corrodes self-trust, the other builds it. And the subconscious listens closely. If the critic dominates your nights, your identity bends toward shame. If the coach guides your nights, your identity bends toward capability. Guilt also thrives on mind reading and time travel. It sends you backward to rewrite scenes, forward to predict disaster, and deep inside other people's heads to invent motives. True reflection refuses those games. It returns to what was seen, done, and chosen. I raised my voice when my son spilled the milk. I was stressed, but that was my choice. Tomorrow, I'll pause, kneel to his eye level, and speak softer. Notice the structure. Acknowledge, own, choose. No drama, no character assassination, just a higher standard. This is Stoic compassion in practice, firm with behavior, kind with the person. Neuroscience quietly agrees. The brain consolidates emotion and memory during sleep. If the last thing you feed it is a looping accusation, it tags that state as important and strengthens the pathway. If instead you feed it a precise lesson and a simple plan, it rehearses competence. By morning, one path yields a nervous system ready to defend. The other yields a nervous system ready to respond. Same event, different input, different self-dot. So how do you build a nightly ritual of reflection without guilt? Start with containers, clear edges that tell your mind what belongs and what doesn't. Give yourself 10 minutes, not the whole night. Sit or lie down with a quiet posture that signals dignity, not defeat. Then move through 3 passes. Pass 1. Fact, not fantasy. What actually happened? No adjectives, no motives, no mind reading. I missed a deadline. I ignored a message. I scrolled for 40 minutes. Facts for you from fog. Pass 2. Value, not verdict. Which virtue? Was strained patience, honesty, temperance, courage? Name it. This anchors your review and ideals, not self-loathing. My patience slipped. My courage was small. Values guide. Verdict's trap. Pass 3. Next, not never. Name one micro-behavior you will try tomorrow. Keep it embarrassingly small. A breath before replying, a 2-minute timer before opening an app, a written checklist for the first hour of work. The mind trusts what it has repeated. Give it something repeatable. Layer in language hygiene. Replace global labels with situational descriptions. Swap, I am a bad parent for I shouted at bedtime. I will practice a whisper first rule. Replace I'm lazy with my energy dipped at 9 p.m. Tomorrow I'll stand while brushing teeth and choose bed over a third episode. The Stoic move is to cut the story and elevate the standard. Introduce compassion boundaries sentences that honor your humanness without excusing low standards. I am not my worst 5 minutes. I can reject a behavior while respecting the person who did it me. Pain is a signal, not a sentence. These lines are not slogans. They're rails that keep the mind from veering into self-harm. If you're prone to spiral, use grounding. Triads. 1 breath, 1 sensation, 1 sentence. Breathe slowly. Feel the weight of your body against the mattress. Say a single clarifying line. I learn at night. I execute in the morning. Triads give the nervous system an anchor when the inner weather turns. Guard against the 4 classic traps of guilty reflection. Vagueness. If you can't name it, you can't change it. Infinity. No open-ended interrogations at midnight. Set a timer. Identity fusion. You did a thing. You are not that thing. Outcome obsession. Review inputs you control, not results you don't. Consider. A small bedtime script that respects your age and load. Inventory 2-3 lines. Today, I finished the report, snapped at Jamie, skipped my walk. Insight 1 to 2 lines. Snapping came from unplanned hunger and a late call. Intention 1 line. Tomorrow, snack at 4 p.m. and pause before speaking when stressed. Permission 1 line. I have done enough for today. That last line matters. Permission is not indulgence, it's design. Without it, your mind keeps the engine running. With it, the engine idles down so deeper sleep can begin. Reflection without guilt also means noticing wins, not just errors. The Stoics didn't pretend virtue was automatic. They reinforced it. When you name 3 things you did well, you aren't bragging. You're telling the subconscious what to repeat. I kept a boundary. I apologized quickly. I shut the laptop at dinner. These are seeds. Plant them at night. Harvest them in the morning. For parents and leaders, model this openly in simple phrases. I overreacted. Next time I'll pause. I missed the mark. Here's my adjustment. People don't trust perfection. They trust repair. Your home and team become calmer when reflection leads swiftly to course correction instead of extended self-condemnation. And what if the day contains something genuinely hard, grief, betrayal, a mistake with real consequences? Then your task is gentler and braver. Hold the pain and hold a plan. The Stoic heart is wide enough for both. This hurts and I can honor it. This matters and I won't let it write my name. You are allowed to be human without handing your nights to despair. In the end, the question is stark and kind. Did my review increase my ability to choose tomorrow? If yes, you reflected. If no, you ruminated. Change the tool. Trade the whip for the compass. Trade the courtroom for the classroom. Trade the sentence, how could I be so stupid, For the sentence, here's the move I'll make next. Then close the door on the day literally, if you can. Turn off the lamp with a small bow to your effort. Whisper a line the Stoics would recognize: what is done is learned. What is learned is enough for tonight. And let the mind rest, not because everything is perfect, but because your attention is finally worthy of your future. There is a peculiar kind of conflict that doesn't end when the conversation ends. It lingers. The words keep echoing, the anger keeps simmering, and the mind becomes a courtroom where the case is retried again and again. You may think the fight is over, but if you carry it into bed, your subconscious becomes the battlefield. And instead of resting, you spend the night at war with yourself. The Stoics knew the danger of unresolved conflict. Marcus Aurelius warned himself not to let the behavior of others rob him of clarity. Seneca observed that we often suffer more in imagination than in reality. Both understood the truth modern psychology confirms: the mind doesn't distinguish between actual events and vividly rehearsed ones. If you relive the argument at night, your nervous system reacts as if the attack is still happening. Here's how it unfolds. A disagreement occurs, maybe with a colleague, a partner, or a friend. You walk away, but the energy is still buzzing. When the lights go out, the brain, free of external distraction, replays the moment. You imagine different responses, sharper comebacks, alternative outcomes. You rehearse the lines you wish you had said. The body responds. The jaw tightens, the heart races, the breath shallows. In effect, you are re-entering combat while lying motionless in bed. The subconscious records this rehearsal. By morning, the anger is stronger, the grudge deeper, the story more entrenched. You think you're tired because you didn't sleep well, but the deeper truth is that you never left the battlefield. Conflict persists at night for 3 reasons. Unfinished stories. The mind craves resolution. When it doesn't get it, it keeps circling, hoping repetition will bring closure. Ego attachment. Conflict threatens identity. If someone disrespected you, the ego demands repair. At night, without distraction, this wound feels even larger. Physiological residue. Adrenaline from the confrontation can linger for hours, keeping the body primed for battle long after the enemy has left. Understanding these forces is the first step. They explain why conflict feels so sticky and why it hijacks rest. The Stoics refused to let conflict dominate their nights. Epictetus taught, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." They knew that the behavior of others is outside our control. To dwell on it endlessly is to surrender sovereignty. Instead, they practiced detachment and reframing. A harsh word from another was seen not as a permanent wound, but as evidence of that person's character. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, "When you wake in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly." By expecting conflict, he reduced its power to shock him. And by reducing its shock, he shortened its lifespan. Separate fact from fiction. Ask, what was actually said? What was my story about it? Often the story is heavier than the fact. Set a boundary. Decide that tonight is not the time for cross-examination. Say, "This does not belong to my pillow." Use mortality as perspective. Ask, "If this were my last night, Would I want these words to be my last rehearsal? The answer is almost always no. Replace with a principle. Instead of replaying their insult, replay your value, patience, justice, or courage. Let that be the final echo. Carrying conflict into sleep costs more than rest. It erodes relationships because you wake up rehearsed for battle. It distorts perception because you start interpreting neutral acts as attacks. And it corrodes identity because you begin to see yourself as someone perpetually under siege. Over time, this becomes your default posture: defensive, suspicious, weary. The irony is that many of the people who hurt you are not thinking of you at all. They are sleeping soundly while you fight them in silence. The Stoics would say, why give them that power? Why let their shadow invade your dreams? To release conflict at night is not to excuse wrongdoing. It is to reclaim your peace. It is to say, this may not be resolved, but I will not let it own my subconscious tonight. That decision is strength, not weakness. It is the recognition that peace is more valuable than the last word, that clarity is worth more than imaginary. Victories.conflict may not end when the conversation ends, but it can end when you decide to stop rehearsing it. And that decision, made nightly, is how you build a mind that rests even in a chaotic world. The Stoics understood that sleep is sacred. It is not just physical rest, but preparation for the soul. To enter it carrying conflict is to poison the well. To enter it with release is to drink deeply of peace. So tonight, if the battlefield follows you into bed, pause, name it, set it down, and remind yourself, my rest is worth more than their insult. Because the strongest warriors are not those who fight every battle, they are those who know when to lay down their weapons and sleep. Most people live as if life were endless. They schedule as though there will always be another tomorrow. They postpone joy, delay forgiveness, and put off the work that matters most. Only when tragedy strikes, an illness, a funeral, a sudden accident, do they feel the sharp reminder that time is not infinite. The Stoics, however, never waited for tragedy. They practiced mortality as a daily discipline, not to become morbid, but to become focused. Modern life has perfected the art of distraction. We build industries around youth, anti-aging, and denial of death. We scroll endlessly, as if the screen can stretch our days. We treat mortality like an intruder, something to be locked outside while we pursue endless tasks. But pretending death is far away does not make it so. It only makes us unprepared. This avoidance has consequences. It makes us obsessed with trivialities, status, gossip, competition, because without awareness of time's limit, everything feels equally urgent. Mortality clarifies by cutting through this fog. It whispers, you are temporary. Not everything matters. Choose carefully. The Stoics carried with them the phrase memento mori, remember that you will die. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily, you could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think. Seneca wrote that life is long enough if used well, but most squander it chasing illusions. Epictetus taught that freedom comes from aligning with nature's law, and nothing is more natural than impermanence. To the Stoics, mortality was not depressing, it was liberating. By remembering the limit, They freed themselves from wasting time on what did not serve virtue. Instead of being pulled into endless noise, they chose focus, wisdom, justice, courage, and self-mastery. At 35 or 45, mortality becomes less abstract. You notice gray hairs. Recovery takes longer. Friends face illnesses. Parents age. You realize you are no longer at the beginning, and the horizon feels closer than it used to. This is not a crisis, it is an invitation. At this stage, clarity is vital. You cannot afford to waste decades repeating the same loops of resentment, overthinking, or endless distraction. Mortality reminds you, the time to change is now, not someday. Every night becomes a checkpoint. Did I live today in a way I would accept if it were my last? Sleep itself is a rehearsal for death. Each night you surrender consciousness. You let go of control. You trust that life will continue without your supervision. The Stoics treated this surrender as sacred. They asked, if this were my final night, what thoughts would I want to echo in my mind? Practical ways to bring mortality into your nightly ritual. The one-line audit. Before bed, ask, if I don't wake tomorrow, am I content with how I lived today? The release exercise. Breathe out while naming something trivial you refuse to carry into the night. Example, this petty argument does not deserve my last breath. The gratitude anchor. Name 3 things you are grateful for, small or large. So that gratitude, not fear, fills the subconscious. These practices are not superstition. They are disciplines that train your nervous system to rest in clarity rather than chaos. Mortality has a way of shrinking the unimportant. Ask yourself, if I had 1 year left, would this still matter? Most worries vanish under this light. Would you still spend hours scrolling through arguments online? Would you still nurture grudges? Would you still ignore the people you love most? Instead, mortality points you toward what endures. Meaningful work, authentic connection, acts of courage, moments of stillness. It reframes every decision. A no to trivialities becomes a yes to what matters. This is urgency, not in the frantic sense of rushing, but in the calm sense of living deliberately. Consider a professional in his 40s, successful on paper, yet restless. He stays up late answering emails, worries constantly about reputation, and measures his worth by promotions. Then a close friend suddenly dies of a heart attack. 4. The first time, mortality is no longer abstract. It is present. He begins asking different questions. If tonight were my last, would I be proud of how I spoke to my children? Would I be content with how I spent my hours? Slowly, he changes. He turns down unnecessary meetings. He chooses dinners with family over late nights at the office. He begins journaling before bed, not about business, but about gratitude. His life does not become easier, but it becomes lighter. That is the power of mortality awareness. Modern psychology agrees with Stoic wisdom. Studies show that people who regularly contemplate mortality experience less anxiety, not more. Why? Because avoidance feeds fear. What we refuse to face grows in the dark. But when you look mortality in the eye, it loses its power to terrify. Instead, it motivates alignment. Carl Jung noted, a man who is unconscious of the laws of his own being is at the mercy of chance. Denying death leaves us at the mercy of chance, swept along by habits, distractions, and the trivial. Remembering death anchors us in choice. Oddly enough, mortality also softens the heart. When you know your days are numbered, it becomes harder to waste them on bitterness. That argument with a partner loses its grip when you realize one day one of you won't be here to continue it. That resentment toward a colleague feels small when you remember both of you are temporary. Mortality teaches forgiveness, not because others deserve it, but because you deserve the peace that comes from not wasting your life on poison. The paradox is this: mortality, far from heavy, makes life lighter. When you accept the limit, you stop carrying unnecessary weight. You stop demanding perfect endings. You stop postponing joy. You live each day not frantically, but attentively. You savor. You simplify. You rest deeper at night because you know you aligned with what matters most. The Stoics did not meditate on death to be grim. They did it to be free. By remembering the limit, they shed illusions. They stopped pretending there was endless time, and therefore they lived with urgency, gratitude, and focus. So tonight, as you close your eyes, remember, this day will never come again. Ask yourself, if this were my last night, would these thoughts deserve to be my last? If not, change them. Release what is petty. Embrace what is true, because mortality, rightly understood, is not a curse. It is the greatest teacher. It shows us that time is precious, that presence is sacred, and that peace is worth more than winning an argument or chasing another distraction. And when you let mortality guide your nights, you will wake each morning not only alive, but truly living. We live in the noisiest age in human history, and yet much of that noise is silent. It doesn't come from engines, factories, or crowded marketplaces. It comes from screens, from endless notifications, from a stream of words and images designed to capture attention. It comes from the thoughts we absorb unconsciously, the comparisons we make automatically, the judgments we scroll past but never release. And this noise doesn't vanish when the lights go out. It follows us into bed, shaping the quality of our rest and the texture of our waking life. Noise today is not measured in decibels, but in distractions. It is the late-night doom scroll, the endless cycle of news headlines, the curated perfection of social media. It is the invisible pressure to keep up, to compare, to consume more. On the surface, these things feel harmless. A few minutes of scrolling, a casual glance at emails, one last check of the feed. But the mind is porous. What you feed it, it absorbs. And what it absorbs becomes the raw material of your subconscious. By the time you close your eyes, your mind is buzzing not from real emergencies, but from artificial noise, and the subconscious, ever faithful, begins rehearsing it all night long. During the day, noise competes with tasks. You're too busy to notice its full effect. But at night, when distractions fade, the noise you absorbed resurfaces. You replay the highlight reel of someone else's life. You worry about tomorrow's headlines. You internalize judgments that were never yours to carry. This is why so many people wake up anxious, even after 8 hours of sleep. They didn't rest in silence, they rested in noise. The Stoics never faced Twitter or TikTok, but they understood the principle. Seneca warned that life is short, and we make it shorter still by carelessly wasting time. Noise is time theft. not just during the day, but especially at night, when it colonizes the subconscious. Why do we cling to noise, even when we know it drains us? Because silence is uncomfortable. When the noise stops, the real thoughts surface: regret, longing, mortality, unresolved conflict. We fear that silence will overwhelm us, so we reach for the glow of the screen, thinking distraction will soothe us. But distraction doesn't soothe, it delays. And in delaying, it compounds the clutter we'll eventually face. The Stoics would call this cowardice. To them, courage was not only about facing enemies on the battlefield, it was about facing the self in silence. To avoid silence is to avoid life itself. At midlife, the problem intensifies. You're not only carrying your own distractions, you're carrying those of your children, your career, your family. Emails, schedules, social updates, group chats, noise multiplies, and without conscious limits, it becomes the background hum of existence. This is why so many in their 40s feel exhausted even before the day begins. Their subconscious never had silence to reset. It was hijacked by notifications and rehearsed them all night. The Stoics lived in cities filled with chaos, markets, and politics. Yet they practiced ataraxia, inner calm. How? By controlling what they allowed into the mind. Epictetus reminded his students, guard your attention as you would guard your body. Marcus Aurelius chose reflection over entertainment, writing his thoughts instead of drowning them in distractions. Seneca advised deliberate withdrawal, not as escape, but as training for clarity. For us, this means setting boundaries with devices, news, and endless chatter. It means asking, does this input serve my peace, or does it steal it? If it steals it, why give it your final hour before bed? Digital sunset. 1 hour before bed, shut down screens. The brain needs darkness to produce melatonin, but the mind also needs silence to produce clarity. Replace noise with philosophy. Instead of scrolling, read a page of Marcus Aurelius, or listen to a calm reflection. Replace junk input with wisdom. Evening journal. Write down the thoughts buzzing in your head. Once on paper, they lose their power to echo all night. Breath anchor. As you lie down, focus on 10 slow breaths. This tells the body, we are done, we are safe. These are not rigid rules. They are acts of sovereignty. They remind the subconscious, tonight we rehearse peace, not chaos. Noise doesn't just waste time, it shapes identity. If you fall asleep to gossip, your soul learns gossip. If you fall asleep to comparison, your subconscious builds envy. If you fall asleep to wisdom, it builds resilience. Marcus Aurelius said, the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. Noise is dye. The question is, what color are you choosing? Noise is the modern plague, but silence remains the cure. The Stoics didn't have our technology, but they had our same minds, porous, absorbent, easily shaped by repetition. Their solution was timeless. Guard the gate of your attention. Do not hand your nights to noise. So tonight, when you reach for the screen, pause. Ask yourself, do I want this to be the last echo my mind carries into sleep? If the answer is no, put it down. Choose silence. Choose clarity. Choose wisdom. Because the strongest minds are not built in noise. They are built in the quiet that follows when you dare to turn the noise off. Identity is not fixed. It is not carved into stone at birth or permanently stamped by past events. Identity is pliable, shaped each day by the choices you make, the thoughts you repeat, and the patterns you allow. The paradox is that most people think identity is forged in big, dramatic moments, career shifts, relationships, crises. But in truth, identity is built quietly, in the repetition of nightly thoughts, in the stories rehearsed when no one is watching. The Stoics understood this long before psychology gave it language. Marcus Aurelius didn't write in his journal because he loved writing. He wrote because he knew repetition forms the self. Each line of reflection was not entertainment, it was training. By repeating wisdom, he dyed his soul in its color. By rehearsing clarity, he became clarity. The subconscious doesn't judge. It doesn't separate fact from fiction, virtue from vice. It absorbs whatever is repeated most often. If every night you tell yourself, "I'm failing, I'm not enough, I'm behind," the subconscious records it faithfully and begins to act as though it were true. You wake up seeing evidence that supports the script, even when reality doesn't. This is how self-doubt becomes identity, not because it's true, but because it was rehearsed. But the opposite is equally possible. If you tell yourself, "I learn from today," "I am stronger than I was yesterday," "Tomorrow I will choose better," those scripts sink in. They don't erase struggle, but they shift the foundation. Over time, you begin to act from confidence, because confidence has been rehearsed. Most people believe transformation comes from a breakthrough, a lightning strike of motivation. They wait for inspiration, a seminar, a dramatic moment. But the subconscious doesn't respond to fireworks. It responds to patterns. It asks, what do I hear most often? What do I see most consistently? That is what it will adopt as identity. This is why Marcus Aurelius wrote the same principles again and again. Why Seneca returned to the same themes in his letters. Why Epictetus drilled his students with repeated exercises. They knew that identity is not formed by what you know once, but by what you practice daily. At 35 or 45, many people wake up one day and ask, "Who have I become?" The answer is usually the product of unconscious repetition. Years of rehearsing worry, resentment, self-criticism, or endless busyness have created an identity that feels foreign. The good news is that identity drift can be reversed, but it requires reclaiming repetition. Instead of unconsciously rehearsing chaos, you begin to consciously rehearse calm. Instead of replaying insults, you replay principles. Instead of letting the world script your nights, you script them yourself. Over time, the drift reverses. Identity realigns with intention. Choose a line of wisdom. Each night, select one short phrase. I control my mind. Peace is my power. I can let go. Repeat it slowly until it feels natural. Visualize tomorrow's self. Imagine yourself facing the day's challenges with steadiness. Let the subconscious rehearse success, not failure. Reject the false script. When the inner critic whispers, respond, "Not tonight." Replace it with your chosen line. Journal for repetition. Write the same principle in your own words nightly. Over time, the handwriting itself becomes muscle memory for the soul. Repetition works both ways. If you don't guide it, it will default to what's loudest: news headlines, social media comparisons, unresolved guilt. And the subconscious, obedient as always, will rehearse those until they feel like truth. This is how people end up living someone else's story, shaped not by their own values, but by repeated inputs they never questioned. The Stoics would say this is slavery of the mind. Freedom comes not from avoiding repetition, but from choosing it. Think of identity as a garden. Every night, thoughts are seeds. Some are weeds, resentment, fear, envy. Some are flowers, gratitude, discipline, clarity. The subconscious does not discriminate. It grows whatever is planted repeatedly. By morning, you reap what you rehearsed. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The things you think about determine the quality of your mind. Your soul takes on the color of your thoughts. That color is chosen nightly. What hue are you painting? Identity is not what you declare in public. It is what you whisper to yourself in the dark. It is not built in one grand moment, but in the repetition of countless small thoughts. So tonight, choose your script. Repeat what you want to become. Refuse what you no longer wish to carry, because in the end you don't become what you wish. For you become what you rehearse, and every night is a rehearsal. Silence is rare in the modern world. We drown it with television, podcasts, playlists, and scrolling feeds. We mistake constant stimulation for life, when in reality it is noise disguised as living. Yet silence is the most direct path to clarity. Stillness is the ground where wisdom grows. The Stoics practiced this discipline not because they hated noise, but because they knew a restless mind cannot become a strong one. When the day ends, silence becomes more than a choice, it becomes medicine. In the quiet, you meet yourself without distraction, and though it can feel uncomfortable at first, that discomfort is the beginning of strength. Most people are afraid of silence. When the noise stops, the thoughts appear: regrets, worries, mortality, unfinished conflicts. Silence acts like a mirror, showing us what we've avoided. That's why so many people keep the television on at night or scroll until their eyes close. They are not afraid of the dark, they are afraid of their own mind in the dark. But avoidance carries a cost. The thoughts don't vanish, they wait. And when you fall asleep in noise, the subconscious carries that clutter deeper. You wake up restless because you never truly faced yourself. The Stoics would say, courage is not just charging into battle. Courage is also sitting quietly with your own soul. If you cannot face your thoughts in silence, you cannot claim to be free. The Greek word ataraxia describes a state of inner calm, a mind undisturbed by chaos. This was the Stoic aim, not a life without struggle, but a soul steady within it. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations, "Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul." He was an emperor surrounded by noise, yet he found stillness by retreating inward. Seneca recommended an evening review, sitting alone in silence, replaying the day not as punishment, but as instruction. He understood that stillness is not emptiness. It is attention. It is listening carefully to the lessons of life without drowning them in chatter. Today, stillness is almost seen as laziness. If you are not producing, posting, or responding, the world calls you unproductive. But busyness is not strength. It is a disguise for restlessness. Many people collapse into bed not because their work was meaningful, but because they never paused. They chased distraction until the body forced surrender. This is why silence feels radical now. To turn off the screen an hour early is to rebel against the culture of constant stimulation. To sit quietly with your breath is to reject the lie that worth is measured by output. To choose stillness before sleep is to reclaim sovereignty over your mind. Neuroscience confirms what the Stoics intuited. During stillness, the nervous system shifts from fight or flight to rest and digest. The brain consolidates memory, regulates emotions, and repairs cells most efficiently when calm precedes sleep. By contrast, if you enter sleep with noise, the nervous system remains activated. Your body rests, but your mind doesn't. That's why people wake up tired even after 8 hours, because they rehearsed chaos instead of stillness. Stillness is not luxury, it is biology. Your brain requires it to reset. Without it, you are not resting. You are merely pausing exhaustion. Digital sunset. Power down screens an hour before bed. Replace scrolling with reflection. Breathing ritual. 10 slow breaths, counted and observed. Each breath tells the body, it is safe to rest. Journaling. Write 1 page of unfiltered thought. Empty the noise onto paper so the mind does not carry it. Philosophical anchor. Choose a Stoic phrase and repeat it. Peace is found within. I control my mind. Let it echo in silence, stillness sitting. Spend 5 minutes in complete quiet. No music, no distractions. Simply observe thoughts pass like clouds. These practices are not dramatic. They are simple, but their effect compounds. Over time, your subconscious learns. Night means calm, not chaos. In modern culture, people confuse silence with weakness. They think the loudest voice wins, that constant expression equals authenticity. But the Stoics knew better. Silence is not absence, it is mastery. It is the pause that gives power to words. It is the stillness that makes action intentional. Marcus Aurelius did not need to shout to rule. His calm gave him authority. Seneca's letters endure not because they were loud, but because they were clear. Silence allowed them to hear wisdom that noise would have drowned. For someone in their late 30s or 40s, silence becomes more than refreshing, it becomes essential. At this stage, responsibilities multiply. Without stillness, the mind buckles under weight. Parents snap at children, professionals burn out, partners drift apart, all because there is no pause, no retreat into quiet. A nightly practice of stillness is not indulgence, it is survival. It ensures you wake not just rested, but resilient. Consider a woman in her 40s, a successful executive. Her life is filled with meetings, deadlines, constant calls. At night, she falls asleep with her phone in hand, scrolling until exhaustion wins. She wakes tired, short-tempered, and scattered. Then she experiments with silence. She replaces her last half hour of scrolling with a candle, a notebook, and quiet. At first, it feels unbearable. Her thoughts rush in. Her regrets scream louder. But slowly, she notices change. Sleep deepens. Mornings become lighter. Conflicts feel smaller. Her children notice she listens more. Her colleagues notice she reacts less. Nothing external changed, only her relationship with silence. This is the quiet revolution Stoicism promises. Strength built not in noise, but in stillness. Silence is not emptiness. It is fullness waiting to be heard. Stillness is not weakness. It is the foundation of strength. The Stoics knew this. They sought quiet not as escape, but as training. They ended their days not in noise, but in reflection, because they understood the soul becomes what it rehearses. So tonight, resist the pull of endless noise. Sit in silence even for a few minutes. Let stillness fill the space where chaos usually reigns. And when you close your eyes, carry that silence with you. Because the most powerful mind is not the one that conquers every battle, but the one that rests unshaken in stillness. Gratitude is one of the simplest practices to understand, and yet one of the hardest to embody consistently. We know we should be thankful. We read studies, hear talks, see posts reminding us that gratitude changes. The brain lifts the mood, deepens relationships. But at night, when the lights go out, gratitude is rarely what fills the mind. Instead, we replay regrets, missed opportunities, slights from others, and endless worries about tomorrow. Gratitude becomes theory, while worry becomes ritual. The Stoics refused to let this imbalance stand. For them, gratitude was not seasonal or sentimental. It was strategic. It was a discipline practiced daily to ensure the mind rehearsed strength instead of scarcity. Seneca wrote, "He is a wise man who does not grieve for the things which he has not, but rejoices for those which he has." This is not about ignoring problems, it is about perspective. Every night, the mind carries two baskets into sleep, one of what is missing and one of what is present. Whichever basket is heavier tips the subconscious toward either rest or restlessness. Gratitude, deliberately practiced, tips the scale. When you name what went right, what was given, what endured, the subconscious records abundance instead of lack. You sleep lighter, not because life is perfect, but because you remembered it is not empty. At 35 or 45, gratitude can feel like a luxury. Responsibilities multiply: children, careers, aging parents, financial obligations. The weight of what's unfinished overshadows the beauty of what is already present. You think, how can I be grateful when there is so much left undone? But this is exactly when gratitude matters most. Without it, you rehearse only pressure. With it, you remind the mind that even under weight, there is still lightness. Gratitude does not erase burdens, but it prevents burdens from becoming identity. Modern research shows that gratitude activates brain regions linked to reward and regulation. It shifts attention away from threat and toward safety. It lowers cortisol, improves sleep quality, and increases resilience. This aligns perfectly with Stoic insight. What you dwell on grows. If you end the day naming threats, the mind rehearses fear. If you end the day naming gifts, the mind rehearses resilience. Neuroscience proved what Stoicism practiced. Gratitude is not just polite, it is rewiring. The three wins. Before bed, write or whisper 3 things that went right today. They can be small: a smile from a stranger, a moment of laughter, the fact that you endured a hard meeting. Small wins compound. The hidden gift. Reframe one difficulty as a teacher. Example: that argument showed me where my patience is weak. This shifts pain into perspective. The anchor object. Keep a physical item near your bed, a photo, a stone, a journal that reminds you of something enduring. Let it cue gratitude nightly. Gratitude breath. Inhale and name one thing you are thankful for. Exhale and release one worry you no longer Wish to carry. These practices don't require time. They require attention. And attention is the currency of identity. Gratitude for the Stoics was not shallow cheerfulness. It was radical acceptance. Marcus Aurelius thanked the universe for both gifts and challenges, writing, "Receive without pride. Let go without attachment." To him, gratitude was not only for pleasure, but for the chance to grow. A hard day was not a thief, it was a teacher. Epictetus went further. Do not seek for things to happen the way you want them to. Rather, wish that what happens happen the way it happens. Then you will. Be content. Gratitude here is alignment. It is saying this was today. It is enough. Gratitude also changes how we see others. Resentment shrinks when gratitude grows. A partner's flaws feel less overwhelming when balanced by remembered kindness. A child's disobedience feels smaller when placed next to their laughter. Gratitude shifts the narrative from scarcity, they never do enough, to abundance, they are imperfect, but they are here. The Stoics valued community and kinship. Gratitude was the lens that kept them from isolating in judgment. At night, reviewing not just what you received, but who gave it, creates humility. It reminds you that you are not self-sufficient, that life is interwoven. Imagine a man in his 40s, exhausted from work, irritated at his family. He collapses into bed thinking of deadlines and frustrations. Sleep comes, but it is shallow. He wakes tense, already behind. Now imagine the same man practicing gratitude. Before closing his eyes, he names, my daughter's hug, the meal on the table, the roof above me. He still has deadlines, but his mind rehearses abundance, not lack. He wakes lighter, more grounded, more patient. Same life, different rehearsal. Gratitude functions as a bridge between yesterday and tomorrow. Without it, you carry unfinished complaints across the night, building stress into the morning. With it, you carry acknowledgement of gifts, giving tomorrow a foundation of abundance. Gratitude says, yes, today was hard, but it was also blessed, and I choose to remember the blessing. This bridge matters because mornings inherit the emotional residue of nights. Gratitude ensures that inheritance is wealth, not debt. Gratitude is not an accessory, it is armor. It shields the mind from scarcity thinking. It trains the subconscious to rest in abundance. It connects the chaos of today with the hope of tomorrow. So tonight, before you close your eyes, pause, name the gifts, count the wins, thank the people, even silently. And when you wake, notice the difference. A lighter chest, a clearer mind, a steadier step. Because gratitude, practiced nightly, does more than make you feel good. It makes you strong. It reminds you that even in a world of noise and burden, there is always enough light to carry you forward. There is a razor-thin line between thinking deeply and thinking destructively. On one side lies reflection, a calm, honest examination. That produces growth. On the other side lies overthinking, a noisy, repetitive loop that drains energy without offering insight. Many people confuse the two. They believe that because they are thinking hard, they must be reflecting. But the truth is, effort does not equal clarity. Overthinking is mental spinning. Reflection is mental seeing. Overthinking multiplies noise. Reflection reduces it. At night, this need for control surfaces most strongly. As you lie in bed, the day replays. A conversation you wish you could rewrite. An email unanswered, a looming deadline. The mind tries to grip them tighter, believing that if you just think harder, you can bend reality in your favor. But the grip only tightens your chest, raises your heart rate, and steals your rest dot. We cling for 3 reasons. Addiction to certainty. The brain craves predictability. In uncertainty, it invents endless scenarios, confusing rehearsal with protection. Threat to ego. A critical look, a curt response, a missed opportunity threatens identity. To restore control, the mind overcompensates. Illusion of productivity. More thinking feels like more doing. But late-night mental loops are energy drainers, not problem solvers. By morning, the body has rested, but the mind has not. You wake with what could be called a mental hangover, not from alcohol, but from over-control. Classic Stoicism draws a line: things within your control and things outside. For the modern adult with layered responsibilities, we can imagine 3 concentric circles. Control. My words, my actions, my choices, my attitude. Influence. My guidance, my persuasion, my preparation. What I can affect, but not dictate. Acceptance. The weather, the past, another's emotions, the final outcome. Before bed, review your concerns and place them in the right circle. When you notice a thought sitting in the wrong circle, move it. This simple mental exercise trains your mind to separate responsibility from obsession. Recognize. Name the moment you are clinging. I am trying to control the uncontrollable. Relabel. Shift the language. This is a craving for certainty, not a real need. Reframe. Redirect. My duty is to prepare, not to predict. Release. Exhale slowly, imagining setting the burden down. You don't need to promise yourself forever. Make a nightly contract. Tonight, I will not demand certainty. Tonight, I rest having done my part. Write it down. Date it. Tomorrow, you can sign. Again. This repetition trains your subconscious that rest is not earned by controlling everything, but by honoring what is yours and surrendering what is not. Create a simple 2-column list. Input mine. Preparation. Tone of voice, effort given, bedtime. Ritual. Outcome, not mine. How others respond, whether they approve, whether things turn out exactly as planned. At night, check only the input column. If you've done your part, close the ledger. Sleep. Use the breath. Inhale fully, then take 1 small sip of extra air. Exhale slowly through pursed lips, as if releasing pressure through a straw. This tells the nervous system, it is safe. You may let go. Repeat 5 to 10 times. Pair it with stillness. Lie still for 10 breaths after. This practice signals both body and mind that the day is closed.